guess what today is? Today's a building day. I had a family member inquiry ask me, for the layman's, if I could make her a table for her garden pot things for her patio. So I was like, yeah. She sent me a picture from Pinterest, and I'm bored as shit in quarantine, so I'm making this. I'll kind of go over the cut list real quick because it's really not a complicated build. So right here, oh Jesus, it's moving. Okay, so I have 3 2x4s. These are both 4 foot long, and this is 2 foot long, and that's going to build the framework, which is going to be 12 by 18. I'm going to half lap those, so the dimensions will change just very slightly. And then I have these 3 skinnier boards, and those are going to be the top, which will be 36 inches long by roughly 12 inches across. It depends on how much I spread out these planks so that it can allow some airflow and some water to drip through when it rains. But I'm pretty much going to be firing up the saw and getting this shit going real quick, so stick around because it's about to get fun. So for the half lap, I'm going to cut in, this is pretty much 1.5 inches, you know, a 2x4 finish is 1.5 inches across. So I'm going to cut 3/4 down, 3/4 over on this side and that side, the whole length of them. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other pieces so that when they lap together, they have a stronger joint there. Just took me like 10 minutes to figure out why I was doing like 8 minutes of video and it ended up being like 2 seconds. It's because I was on time lapse the whole time. Thanks GoPro, sick dudes. All right, so I'm gonna show you guys how to do a half lap. This is what a half lap looks like when it's done. It has you pretty much cut out half of the board, and then the other half of the board is going to sit here, and then this tongue piece is going to go in there. So to do this, all I need is a circular saw. This is set to half the width of this, 3/4 inch. I use this speed square as a guide for the edge of my saw, just so that I have super straight cuts. Then I'm gonna use the mallet to tap out the relief cuts, and then a chisel to pare everything else down. First and foremost, clamp your work down, because obviously you're gonna be running a saw. I tend to clamp it a little bit further away so I can get the speed square in there. Mallet out of there. And then I take my saw, I line it up. I don't know how good you guys can see this. I line it up so that it is right on the line, and this is my first and needs to be my straightest cut. So I'm going to hold this up against the board. And then just do further relief cuts from there. So now I take my mallet and just tap these little pieces out, and they are just going to crack along the grain. But they typically, unless you have terrible grain orientation, they typically are not going to go below this. So then I just take a chisel and start knocking out the high points. And I picked a wider chisel for this because the saw is doing most of the work. There's really not a lot of chisel work to do here, so you're really just paring all this down and just making sure it's nice and flat. There's all of that. As you can see, this big piece, when you try to chop out those, sometimes you'll go below your cut line, so just be careful when cutting those. And I have these little hairs right in the middle here, so what I'm going to do is just take the chisel and just drag it right along the corner, and all those clear right out. And that's how you do a half lap joint. So now I'm going to do this for the rest of pretty much all the joints so I can get those together, and then I'll do the assembly of the legs. So if you look, ooh, pretty. See how these get a lot tighter together? So you just tack a couple screws in here, pump a couple screws in there, and that's a much tighter joint than just doing the butt ends. When you butt, my issue when you butt end, so pretty much like this, when you take these two pieces and just screw them together like that, there's no strength in this joint besides the screws that are holding it together. So I would much prefer to take a little bit extra time, do the half lap joint, and get that kind of box set, so when there's downward pressure on it, which this is made for, there's a little bit more strength and a little bit more, you know, rigidity to these supports. So that's kind of my 2 cents. I like also just messing around with joints because I'm a wood nerd and I like playing around with stuff like that. So definitely try it. If you're only doing butt joints, tacking screws and this stuff, it's such a waste of time. This stuff lasts a season or two and then it starts to break. So these half lap joints will add a lot more time to, you know, this is a garden table, so it'll add a lot of. That cloud is staring at me and it is angry. We have a big thunderstorm coming in, so I'm trying to like fire through all these joints before I have to go inside. I gotta get some last cuts done, but hopefully I don't get rained out before I get some of this stuff done. Now typically I would countersink these, but I don't have a countersink that's small enough to fit this. So these are self-tapping screws though, so I'm just gonna put 2 on each side. I just always start them real slow and drive them home. I was using nails as spacers in here, so now I can just take my claw and I just tapped them in slightly so that it came out easy and I didn't do any damage to the nail either. Now, one thing you could tell is if you look right along this edge, it's a little jagged. Same with on this side. So what I'm actually going to do, and I sort of did that on purpose, pretty much what I'm going to do is just take my track saw, put it right along the side, make a nice clean cut, and make sure everything is all, you know, nice and purty. And then I'll be done. But for now, ta-da! And even though this is for plants, like you could sit on it too. I wouldn't, if you're 500 pounds, I wouldn't sit on it, but luckily I'm not. So 200 is your limit. But it's for plants. So it'll hold plenty of plants and it'll hold them nice and sturdy. So if you're looking for a quick garden bench, or even just a bench for people that aren't too fat, there you go. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Later, dudes.